Question for you. Let this sink in. If the whole world was blind, how many people would you impress? You might want to just close your eyes for a second while you think about that. The whole world was blind. How many people would you impress? All of a sudden, it doesn't matter what car I drive, doesn't matter where my house is, what clothes I'm wearing, any of the other things that we do to show people what we have and how much we've accumulated in life. All they really are going to know then is the tone of our voice, the touch of our hands, the love, the kindness, the things that we do for them. We actually have a person who comes to our Saturday night service who is blind, and she sits right up in the front up here, and she was smiling, saying, "Now you all get to see my world. This is how I experience you." And she says, "I love our church because this is the way people treat me here. I'm not impressed by what you're wearing because I don't have any idea what it looks like, but I love being talked to. I love being hugged and welcomed." It's a different kind of a world. I had to read a book back in high school. Some of you may recognize this author's name, John Steinbeck, of Mice and Men, The Grapes of Wrath, and The Pearl. This is a little short book, less than 100 pages, and it tells a story of a very poor family. The husband's name is Kino. They are Mexican peasants who live along the beach in Mexico. It's a fictional story. And he and his wife live in a little wooden hut along the edge of the beach, along with lots of other people in their same situation. And he makes his living by diving for pearls. So he has a little canoe, and he goes out in the ocean a little further out, and they free dive looking for pearls. And one day, he finds one that is magnificent. It's the largest he's ever seen, beautiful, perfect, everything. Gets back, the whole village is celebrating with him because he's now has his ticket out of poverty. From all of this daily subsistence of taking their pearls into the little village and selling them to the pearl merchants, now he has a chance for he, his wife, and their new little baby to be blessed, to have everything they could want, a home, education, all the things anybody would want. And as the news begins to spread, the news spreads also into the little town where the pearl merchants are, and they realize there's a big one coming. There's a really big one coming. It's going to be worth a lot. And so they all conspire together to offer him a low-ball price, something that's not even remotely close to what the pearl's worth. And they say, oh, they try to make all these complaints about what's wrong with it. And kind of like when you take your car to a used car dealership to get rid of it, like, oh, there's a bump here and this here, and it's going to cost us a fortune to fix this. I can take it off your hands for this, kind of thing. So they just give him this whole show. And he realizes, okay, they're ripping me off. I know this is worth a lot more. So we're going to have to go to the next biggest town. And as they go home, he buries it in the sand inside of his little hut in the corner so nobody can get it. And then during the night, he hears scratching. Somebody's digging underneath the hut, trying to steal his pearl. So they flee to a neighbor's house. And then they decide, we're going to get out of here. This is dangerous for us. So they're going to get in their boat, try to paddle further down, and the boat's been sabotaged. Some person that's not heard about this thing is greedy for it, and they destroy his boat. He can't take his boat anymore. He's lost his livelihood. And as they begin to flee, they realize there's a fire going. They look back, and it's their huts on fire. Somebody's burned their house down now to sift the ashes to try to find the pearl. They get out, heading away through the countryside, and realize there's some people tracking them. And so he's terrified now, and he has to get his wife. They find a little cave up on the side of a hill, and he takes his wife and baby up there, and they hide in the cave so the trackers hopefully won't find them. And just by the way the story goes, the trackers decide to put their camp right at the bottom of that hill. There's no way they can leave. The campers realize the tracks end here. They've got to be up there somewhere. So he realized the only hope I have to protect my wife and child and get out of here and try to have the life we've always wanted is for me to go deal with these guys. So he sneaks down during the night to go engage these men and do business. And right about the time he does that, the baby lets out a cry. And one of these men does a snapshot with his rifle up toward the cave. The story finishes by Kino and his wife walking back slowly to the village that they came from. She's carrying their dead baby in their arms because a ricochet through the cave killed their baby. He ends up at the edge of the shore as the sun is going down, makes sure nobody can see what he's doing, and he takes that pearl and he hurls it as far out in the water as he can, because this thing that should have brought them another life, opportunity, education, freedom, prosperity, ended up costing them their home, their business, their baby, and everything because of the greed of wealthy and powerful people. That's the pearl. Pretty depressing story. pretty true to life, too. As I grew up from the age of 16 reading that, I got to realize, yeah, that's how the world often works. There are people who have wealth and power that tend to manipulate things in such a way that they win a lot more often than other people do. And that's what James is going to talk to us about today in chapter 5. He's going to be talking to a group of people that need to be talked to. And we're going to find out that that also includes us. So this study of ours, we've been doing it for quite a few months now, walking through this New Testament book of James. I want to remind you, in case you haven't heard before, this is a man who was raised in the same home as Jesus. Mary and Joseph had Jesus, and then there are lots of other children. So he's a half-brother of Jesus. Jesus was the Son of God, perfectly born, we know that. But they had a couple other kids, not so perfect. And so imagine growing up in the home with a perfect brother. That'd be hard on anybody. But he sees Jesus grow up. He sees his teachings, his miracles, all he does. He sees Jesus raised from the dead. He becomes the pastor of the very first Christian church in the city of Jerusalem ever, so kind of neat. And this man has a great eyewitness testimony to share with us. He's been walking us through this letter he sent out to the churches. And as we get to chapter 5 today, we're going to find out something that's pretty hard for us to hear. There's a man named James, and he's been teaching us like a tender pastor, brothers and sisters, just trying to educate us about what it means to be a Christian. He's been saying, show me your faith by what you do. Be careful about your mouth. Don't be jealous of other people. He's given us a lot of great lessons. But today he's not going to be talking to us as a tender-hearted pastor. Today he's going to be talking to us as a morally outraged prophet. He's going to say, I'm seeing some things that are wrong. And he's going to be remembering back that when this church in Jerusalem started, it happened back in Acts chapter 2, right after Jesus dies and is raised again. About 50 days go by, and then this holiday called Pentecost happens, where the Holy Spirit comes on these early Christians, fills them. They begin to preach and teach in the city. They begin to share. Thousands of people become Christians. And in chapter 2 of Acts, you see this incredibly beautiful picture. Chapter 2, verses 42 to 47, where this church is meeting in each other's homes. They're studying the Word of God together. They're taking care of each other, eating their meals together. There's not anyone among them that has a need. They're so generous. They're so giving. Just 11 years later, James is writing this letter that we're studying now. And in 11 years, we went from a church where everybody took care of everything, and the widows were taken care of, everything was great, to there are some people now, maybe in the church, definitely in the community, that are living with incredible greed to the destruction of other people's lives. And that's who he's going to be speaking to today. It's going to be a hard thing for us to hear. There's a strong theme that runs throughout the whole Bible, and I've shared it with you many times, that God has a heart. He has a predisposition to take care of the poor, take care of the struggling, take care of people that didn't have a fair shake at life. He specifically talks about widows and orphans, about sojourners, people traveling, immigrating from one place to the next, that God has a heart for that. And the Old Testament prophets, they talk about that, and they rebuke people for abusing the poor. The Old Testament law had things written into it where if you were harvesting your field, you couldn't go straight to the corners. You had to round off around the corners so that the poor could come and harvest their grain. You see that happen in the book of Ruth. They could take a stick and tap the branches on the fruit tree that they owned so the fruit would fall to the ground, but they couldn't tap the stick a second time. You had to leave that other fruit for the poor to come and have something to eat. So God kind of built in this kindness into the law. The prophets rebuke people, and when Jesus came, Jesus says, you spiritual leaders, you're devouring widows' houses. He says, you're taking advantage of these poor widows to get their houses so you can sell it, make more money. That's despicable. He said, you want to look nice on the outside, you want to do all the right things and pray in public, but you neglect the weightier matters of the law, things like love and mercy and justice and kindness. Jesus had to rebuke them for these same kind of things that they were still doing wrong in his day. Does the Bible rebuke people for being rich? No, it does not. It does not. There's nothing wrong with being rich. If you happen to be very rich, good for you. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. There are some people in the Bible, different characters. Abraham, very wealthy man. He used his to be a blessing to other people. You have his Joseph, the coat of many colors. Quite wealthy. He ended up being the leader of second in charge of all of Egypt. Quite wealthy. Took care of his family, saved the whole world from famine. Another man named Joseph in the New Testament, Joseph of Arimathea. He's the one who gave Jesus his tomb to be buried in because Jesus didn't have a place to be buried in when he died. And so you see a few examples of very wealthy people in the Old Testament and a few in the New that were gracious and giving and generous with what they had. But you see a few examples, and you see thousands of examples of people who chose greed at the expense of the poor. So the scale's quite tipped that it is possible to be a good, rich person and use your wealth for great things. I'm going to tell you about one today before we finish. But the tendency in the human heart is to accumulate, to have materialism, to want more things, to worship and idolize our wealth. That's our struggle. So it's not wrong to be wealthy. That's not the issue, but there are some issues. What does the Bible warn about? Here's what I want to talk about today, and this is all from James, what he's going to show us. 4 big things the Bible does condemn when it comes to us and our money. Number 1 is how some people make their money. Some people make their money in an unethical way. Some people get in trouble and they get condemned because of how they treat their employees or servants who work for them. Some for how they worship and put their trust in their money rather than God. And some because they use their money extravagantly for their own life while ignoring the poor around them. These 4 topics you're going to see today in James chapter 5 in these first couple of verses. Are we ready for this? Well, let's see. First, we have to answer a question. He starts off and says, "Come now, you rich, gather around. I have a story to tell you." And when he says you rich, a lot of us go, well, he's not talking to me. Have you seen my bank account balance? I'm not Mark Zuckerberg. I'm not Elon Musk. I don't have a big 450-foot mansion and boat and houses all over the world, and I own my own island. He's not talking to me. I'm not rich by any means. We tend to do that often. We hear the word rich like, that's not me. The reality is we live in the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. And the reality is about 2 billion people on planet Earth survive on less than $2 a day. So when you think about that, and you go through the drive-thru and you get a coffee for $6 or $7, you're now fabulously wealthy compared to what some people do. If you have a house, you have a place to live, you have transportation, you have several different clothing options to choose from every day and shoes and all the rest. We really are rich according to the standards of the world. We're definitely more wealthy than the people in James's day that we're talking. And so we have to be honest with ourselves and say, I don't get to turn my brain off and say, well, he's talking to somebody else today. This isn't my problem. All of us have resources. We have a choice. I can use what I need. It's wise to save for the future. Please do that. Save for your retirement because you're going to need health insurance and other things. It's wise to save to help your kids if you want. It's wise to have a vacation once in a while, go out to eat in a nice place. That's fine. We can do all that. But if I ever turn the corner and start thinking I just need a little bit more and I'm not going to help anybody over here that needs it because I want more for me, we have crossed a bad bridge. And that's what he's going to look at. So let's just be honest. Let's just be open-minded and say, maybe he's talking to me today. Maybe I should just listen with one of my ears, and maybe I'm rich just a little bit. Look at this next part. Come and listen, you rich. Weep and howl for the miseries which are coming upon you. Welcome to church, folks. If you're here for the first time, this is not what I talk about all the time. Well, we just teach our way through books of the Bible. This happens to be where we are today. When he says weep and howl, this is a shriek of horror is what this means, translation. It means you have now finished your life. You are standing before God who is holy and righteous and knows all, and now you realize, whoops, I spent my whole life thinking about me, being fabulously wealthy, getting the things I wanted, thinking about me, being selfish, consuming. I didn't think about the poor. I didn't think about the needy. I didn't have a compassionate heart, and now I'm going to get it. It's the same exact word used to describe Peter, Jesus' disciple. After Jesus was getting ready to die, remember Peter's conversation? Jesus said, you're all going to run away. You're all going to desert me and flee. And Peter says, oh, no, not me, Jesus. I'll never leave you. These other guys, bunch of schmucks, but not me. I'll always be here. Jesus said, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. Oh, no, I'll never deny you. And he does. He denies Jesus. And that same Peter, when he gets through with that, the Bible says he wept bitterly. Same exact word. When he says weep, same word. The idea is Peter's on his knees, tears flying out of his face, saying, how could Jesus ever forgive me? How could he ever use me again? How could I ever be anything to help Jesus? I betrayed him, not just once, not twice, but 3 times. It's a sense of complete and total desolation. And he says, if I'm talking to you, this is the only proper response you can have, is you need to be weeping in repentance. It is a strong, strong challenge that James is throwing out here, saying, you're probably already toast because of how selfish you've lived your life, but maybe there's just a sliver of grace that if you hear this and respond correctly, God can forgive you. It's that strong. Remember, he's an outraged prophet talking to us today. Show you this in the Old Testament, 2 different places. This language is not new to James. Isaiah says, wail, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come as destruction from the Almighty. Therefore, all hands that think they're proud are going to fall limp, and every human heart will melt. The idea is in fear. They will be terrified. And when the day of judgment comes, nobody's going to be standing proud before God. Another one from the prophet Amos. The songs in the palace, meaning the rich and wealthy that are having a great time and just living it up, those songs are going to turn to wailing. of loss on that day, declares the Lord God, because the corpses will be many, judgment's coming. To every place they will throw them out. Hush, stop your singing. And hear this, you who trample the needy, to put an end to the humble in the land. In the Old Testament, God had to speak harshly to people who were abusing their wealth at the expense of the poor. And many of the prophets, these are 2 of hundreds of verses I could show you. Just want you to see it. What James says is nothing new. This has been an issue with humanity ever since Adam and Eve first sinned. We are a messed up people. There's 3 ways in the Old Testament that you could have wealth, and it's easy to remember them with these 3 words. You could have grain, meaning you were a wealthy landowner, you were a farmer, you had an orchard full of olives, you had cattle, you had sheep, you had wheat fields, you had all the things that you could do to sell and make money. You also could have garments, where you had nice clothing. There were particular shellfish that put out a purple dye, and they were extremely expensive, the process of gathering these shellfish to get enough to make the dye. So if you had purple stained clothes, that's why that was a color of royalty, because they're the only ones who could afford it. If you had special clothes, you were considered wealthy. You could show people what you had. Or you could have gold. You could have coinage. Remember the first question I asked you, if the whole world was blind, how many people would you impress? If they couldn't see your grain piles, if they couldn't see your garments, and if they couldn't see your piles of gold, you wouldn't impress anybody. But these tend to be the 3 things that we all kind of get behind. Okay. Grain's not such a big deal. It happens. Garments. Let's keep going. He says, let me speak to you as a prophet. I'm going to say these next 3 things to you, James says, as if it's already happened. Because although right now you have stockpiles of grain and you have lots of nice clothes and you have coin, I'm going to tell you, with the way God sees it, it's as if you've already lost all those things. I'm going to speak to you in judgment. Your riches have rotted. The weevils have gotten into the grain sacks, and all that you had piled up is now worthless. Ever been eating a bowl of cereal and you see a little black speck in there and you're like, what is that? Yeah, you're eating weevils. It's in there. And you just kind of go pour it down the sink. Done for the day. Ugh. Your grain is rotted, he says, and your garments have become moth-eaten. You've got so many clothes to where you can't even wear them all, and the bugs have gotten to them, and they've ruined them. Garments were a way to show wealth again. Paul said, I cherish and covet no man's garments. Joseph received a coat of many colors from his father that set him apart as someone of great value. We understand that. And then he says, your gold and your silver have rusted. Now, technically, gold and silver don't rust, but they can become tarnished from lack of use. And that's exactly what he means. The idea is you have so much coin in bags piled up around you, you're not even using it. If you're somebody who still carries around change in your pocket and you use it a lot, it ends up getting slick and shiny because of how often it gets rubbed in your legs, your pants, your hands, and exchanging with other people. But he says, you've got so much money, you can't even use it all. It just sits in piles in your house, in these bags that you stored it in. And it's so unused that it's tarnished. You've got way more than you could possibly ever need. Why are you keeping it for yourself? That's the idea. It's rusted now. There's nothing good here that you could possibly use. We see these kind of things happen in our world. He says this rust on these things is a witness against you, and it will consume your flesh like fire. He says you're going to be judged by God because you hoarded so much that you could have used to be a blessing to other people that needed it. We see these abuses. A corporate CEO retires, gets this golden parachute worth millions and millions of dollars right about the same time that they lay off 10,000 people because the company doesn't have enough money to pay them. And we say, oh, that is wrong. We see a college football coach get paid tens of millions of dollars for failing to win games because they had a really great contract that somebody signed that says, if we decide to fire you, we're going to pay you everything we owe you anyway. I'd love to get paid for failure. Man, that'd be so easy. I'll just go out there and let the guys do whatever they want. You can fire me after whatever, but I'll still take the millions and go home. We live in a crazy world. We also see abuses with finding out that we have shoes that we buy for sports, and we find out that these shoes that we're buying for $150 a pair are made by children in a sweatshop in some third world country, and they're being abused. And then the company takes that very little amount they put there, bring it over here, slap a marketing campaign on it, and sell it to us for an outrageous profit. That's not right, is it? It happens. Clothing we wear can come from places like that too. It's wise for us to ask questions and look around and say, is there someone being abused and taken advantage of so that I can have this? I share with you guys the coffee that we serve you at the church as part of our missions budget. We buy that from people who work specifically in a Christian setting with families that live in poverty. They get paid a fair wage for what they do instead of buying it from some big corporation. We're trying to be intentional about justice and do those kind of things. But he says your coin is calling out as a judgment against you because you're doing this so wrongly. Let me say it this way. The idea of James's thought is this: you have stockpiled so many possessions, more than you could ever possibly use, that their very lack of use calls out against you to condemn you. You have so much you can't even use it all, when all around you there are people made in God's image who have real needs, but you won't help them. That's the condemnation. He goes on and says, in the last days that you're doing this, by the way, you think you've got all the time in the world to enjoy this stuff you're stockpiling, but you're not. You're going to die. Judgment day is coming. Jesus tells a wonderful parable about this in Luke chapter 12 of a rich man who had an agricultural paradise. He had so much grain come in one year, a bumper crop. He says, I've got to build bigger barns. He could have said, I need to give this away to the poor, but he doesn't say that. He says, I'm going to build bigger barns for all of my stuff, and I'm going to eat and drink and have everything set for the rest of my life. And Jesus says, you fool, tonight your life is required of you. Now who's going to inherit all this that you've stockpiled? No, we don't always have what we think we have when time comes. Where should I be investing this treasure? Should I be tossing it into a trash can and wasting it all on me? Probably not. Jesus has an answer for you if you want to see it. He speaks this to all of his disciples, which includes us. He says, I want you to sell your possessions. Again, not everything. You have to have something to take care of yourself. But sell your possessions. Give to charity. Make yourselves money belts that will not wear out. An inexhaustible treasure in heaven, that there's a way to spend my money that goes to heaven for me. That's kind of cool. Where no thief will destroy and no moth will destroy. You notice James has actually been quoting Jesus when we read his story. He's talked about rust and moss, and he's quoting what Jesus taught him. Kind of neat. And he says there's a way to use your money in such a way that it's going to be waiting for in heaven, not the stuff, but the people that get to go to heaven because you used your money for them to hear the gospel and believe in Jesus and go to heaven. That's the amazing thing. Instead of putting it in a bank or in a safe or something else or under your mattress, we get to help use it for people to hear the news of Jesus as Savior, and they go to heaven and they're waiting to meet you when you get there. That's going to be incredible to watch that. One of our young ladies in our student ministry gave Pastor O'Brien the nicest compliment. She said, you are so kind and good to us. You take such good care of us. You listen to us. And she said, I think when you get to heaven, there's going to be a long line of people that want to say thank you to you. Oh, that's incredible. That's the kind of thing you want, to know that you're doing that in your life. What a story. I can say this with full authority. There's no book in any literature that speaks so explosively to social justice as the Bible. Nor is there any book that has proven so powerful as a social dynamic to change the world. It insists that those that have wealth use it with a merciful responsibility and guard ourselves against the temptations toward callousness. You look at hospitals, you look at universities, you look at science. Every good thing that's come out of human civilization comes because Christians have read their Bible and put it to use and said, this is what God expects me to do, and I'm going to do this. That's where all of these things come from. You can study this. These good things come because Christians are doing what the Bible says to do in the right kind of way. We're not being callous. We're instead to being mercifully responsible with what God has entrusted to us. It is a great, great gift to have. He's going to finish up with a couple more little things here. He's talked about their attitude. Now he's going to be a specific example of what they've done. The idea is these selfish rich people that he's preaching against, they're going to be condemned for two major reasons. One, they've gained their wealth by injustice against the poor. And two, they've used their wealth selfishly, ignoring the poor. Here he goes. He already talked to us about the coin that you stockpiled judging you. Now he's going to say it again. Behold, which means listen up, pay attention, the pay of the workers, the laborers that mowed your fields, harvested your wheat, which has been withheld by you, cries out against you. He says, these people are working for you, and you didn't pay them. And the coin that's in your pocket is crying out for justice to go from your pocket to their pocket where it rightfully should be. What was going on at the time of Jesus' life and James' life in Jerusalem is that they had a lot of agricultural stuff around the city, and over time, when there was a famine, there was a drought, there were locusts that came through, the poor people couldn't endure that, and they would often have to sell their land to a wealthier landowner who had more resources. And of course, he wouldn't pay them a full fair price. He would get it at a great price for himself. Now this person has no land upon which to work and provide for their families. They have to become a day laborer and work for the wealthy man. And at the end of each day, they're supposed to get paid because that's all they can do. They have no other resources. Let me show you this law from the Old Testament. It's very clear what you're supposed to do. Moses speaks in Deuteronomy. He says, "You shall not exploit a hired worker who is poor or needy, whether he's one of your countrymen," meaning another Jew, or if he's a stranger who's in your land from another town. He's an immigrant or something. He says, you don't get to exploit these people. "You shall give him his wages on the day before the sun sets." He gave you a hard day's work, you give him a hard day's pay. He is poor. He has set his hope on that, meaning he's got to take that money and go buy food to feed his family that night. And he can't cry out against you. And if you do, don't do this, is so that he will not cry out against the Lord and it becomes a sin. He says, if you don't pay him, he's going to let God know and God's going to deal with you. It's exactly the point. So watch this. I told you there's 3 ways you can be wealthy: with your grain, your gold, and your garments, right? If you withhold wages from this poor person who's worked all day for you and he's sweating the fields, he's taking care of the crops, now you're supposed to pay him, and you don't do it, now his family has nothing to eat, they have no grain, they have nothing to wear, they have no garments, they have no gold, they have nothing to save, they have no chance of ever doing better, of ever having hope, of ever getting out of this and having something of their own again. You see how he's brought this full circle? The same 3 things he says that God is judging you for, that your grain is rotted, your clothes are moth-eaten, your gold is crying out against you. He says when you withhold this from other people, you're taking away from them so you can increase your pile, and God will judge you. There's no escaping the justice of God on this. To withhold that man's pay is to kill him. How can he feed his family if you won't pay him the money he's earned? And then he says something even more scary. The outcry of those who did the harvesting has reached the ears of the Lord of Sabbath. This phrase, the Lord of Sabbath, is talking about the God who commands the angel armies. The armies of God, these angelic creatures. We're going to study that in the month of December. It's coming soon. We're going to look at angels for a few weeks. He says when you mess with God, you're now messing with the God who commands all the angel armies of heaven, myriads and myriads of army of angels. How would you like to go up against an infinite, powerful God and all of the creatures he's created? I don't think you're going to win that. In fact, let me show you an Old Testament Bible story. Everybody knows the story of David and Goliath. Here's David talking to Goliath. He says, David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword and a spear and a saber, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of armies," same words, the Lord of Sabbath, "and the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." Anybody remember how that story ends? Little bitty David with his 5 stones, throws one, hits Goliath, knocks him out, kills him. And Goliath's 9 feet something tall, he's gone. And then David goes over to him and he doesn't just like say, "You're dead." He cuts off his head. He actually cuts his head off after he's dead and holds it up like, "See, don't mess with God." That's the God, James says, that you've messed with. So all of his audience listening to him that grew up Jewish would have known that story, just like our kids know the story in the Bible. He's like, that's the God you've just upset. The God who commands the angel armies, the same God that David called on when he fought Goliath, that's the God you've just insulted because you have taken advantage of the poor and you haven't paid them what you owe them. Big trouble. And he says, meanwhile, here's what you're doing. You have lived a life of luxury on this earth. You've had everything you've wanted. You've pampered yourself with all of it. You've led a life of wanton pleasure. You eat till you're stuffed. You wear everything. You do what you want. It's all about you. He says, but you have fattened your heart in the day of slaughter. He says, while you're gorging yourself on all your possessions that you've stolen from the poor, you don't realize it, but you're that fat pig in the pen that's about to be taken to dinner. Your judgment's coming. Keep eating, keep gorging yourself, taking advantage of the poor. You're going to die. God is going to judge you for the evil that you have put upon them. That's tough. Sum it up like this. The selfish rich have used their possessions to gratify their own love of comfort and to satisfy their own lusts, and they've forgotten the duty to their fellow men. Once again, is it wrong to have a lot of money? No, it's not wrong to be wealthy. If you make a lot, if you're smart, you work hard, good for you. It's not about what you have, it's about what you do with it, how you got it, how you treat people that helped you get it. Those are the issues, the moral issues he's talking about. Not a problem. Here's the last verse. He says, by withholding those people's money, you have condemned and put to death the righteous man. He was righteous. He worked for you. He did his part. But by not paying him, you have put him to death. You have starved him and his family. And he does not resist you. He can't. He's poor. The system's rigged. The wealthy play golf together with the judge. Nobody's going to do anything about this because they have the controls of power. They can do what they want. They can abuse. We talk up sometimes in our country about having a two-tiered justice system where the rich and powerful can do something and they kind of just don't anything ever happen with them. But if it happened to you or I, we'd be in jail for 20 years because there's powerful people that just play the game differently than we do, and it's not fair. That's the same thing he's looking at here. So failing to do good, James told us earlier, is sin. If you know the good you're supposed to do it, it's sin. You think you're storing up wealth, you're really storing up wrath from God if you go this way. We can feast lavishly. We can dress extravagantly. We can spend wildly and do all those things, but it's not there. This is an author that I really appreciate. He writes a lot of things about generosity. His name is Dr. Randy Alcorn. A little bitty tiny book called The Treasure Principle. I'd encourage you to get it. He says the act of giving is a vivid reminder that it's all about God and it's not about us. That God's money has a higher purpose than my affluence. Giving is a joyful surrender to a greater person and a greater agenda. And he says, let me tell you a little bit more. As long as I still have something and I think it's mine, I believe I own it. But when I give it away, I relinquish control and power and prestige. And at the moment of release, the light turns on. He says, I recognize it's God who's really the owner of all this, yes. And myself as his servant, yes. And others as the intended beneficiaries of all God has entrusted to me. He says, this is what it's about. It's not about me keeping it all. It's about me blessing others because God's first blessed me. I want you guys to know, I've been preparing for our missions fair, which comes at the last week of January, and as I was working with Susan Johnson on her staff to think about how we're going to set up the gym and all the tables we'll need, we were kind of going through the list, and I was shocked to realize how much we're doing. We have 19 local partnerships where we help support other Christian ministries, and we volunteer. Cub is one we're going to go to next Sunday and feed the homeless again. If you want to come volunteer, let me know. We also have 19 international partnerships, which are sometimes missionaries in other countries or people that we're helping with there. So we have 38 different mission initiatives that are happening through our church, and you guys are helping make all that happen. You should be proud of yourself for that. That's amazing to watch. Let me tell you a story as we wrap up today. Anybody ever eaten a Hershey's candy bar? Hershey's Kisses? Reese's? Every hand should go up. All right. Some of you just won't admit it. This guy, Milton Hershey, kind of famous. He was a businessman who failed twice before he became famous for his chocolate company. I've got to get these in the right order. So by the age of 30, he'd already failed twice with 2 different businesses he launched. He had to go home and live with his parents. How embarrassing to be that age and still at home because he tried and failed 2 things. But he kept going. By 1900, a long time ago, he finally succeeded. The Hershey Chocolate Company was making him millions of dollars. And think about what millions meant back in 1900. He was extremely wealthy. He built an entire town, Hershey, Pennsylvania. Some of you may have seen that on a trip. He had the factory there, of course, to make the chocolate, but he had homes for people that worked for him. There was parks, there was trolley lines, there were schools. He was very generous to take care of all of his employees. He married this woman named Kitty. Catherine was the love of his life, and they had everything. They had everything they wanted except one thing, which was children. They couldn't have children. And they could have doubled down and said, you know what, well, if we don't have kids, we're just going to splurge and spend everything we have on ourselves. We have all this crazy wealth. Let's just live it up. That's not what they chose. They chose to do something else. They said, how about we reach out and take care of other children who don't have what they need? And so they started some orphanages and schools. They called it the Hershey Industrial School. It was a boarding school for orphan boys who had nowhere else to go. A real house where children could come, families could live and learn and be together. And she would go visit these kids, and she would spend time with them as if they were her own. And she just loved them, and she kind of got to be the mom that went around all the time and did this. Everything was going great. At the age of 42, she passed away, 1915. And they wondered what he would do. Now that she's gone, would he just give up, stop the project or not? And he doubled down again and said, no, I'm going to be fully involved with it again. So in 1918, he did something incredible that shocked the business world. He transferred the majority ownership of the Hershey Chocolate Company, which at the time was valued at $60 million. Again, think of that, $60 million 100 years ago, into a trust, a legal trust for the school. Not a portion of his wealth, not his own personal fortune, but the entire company was put into this trust. Every Hershey bar sold back in those days was now funding the education of these orphan children. Every Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, amen. Every Hershey's Kiss, it was all going to take care of children. And his business friends thought he was nuts. This is not what you do. We're talking, it's almost a roaring 20s. Things are about to be crazy and extravagant, great Gatsby kind of stuff, just all the rich being the richest they could be. And this man gave it all away. At the end of his life, he was 88. He lived in a small little apartment inside the hotel that was on his property. He didn't live in a big mansion. He just went simple, to live simple and give generously. Well, in the meantime, warm beds and 3 meals a day and education and love and acceptance were given to thousands of kids. And it didn't stop when he died. Today, 81 years after, the Milton Hershey School serves over 2,000 students still today, from kinder through 12. Every single one comes free. They get all their meals, education, everything taken care of. They've expanded it to include other children. Boys and girls can come now. Kids, single parent homes, all kinds of options are available. The Hershey Trust grew from a few million to 17 billion now in assets. It's one of the wealthiest educational trusts in America. Everybody gets to come. Over 11,000 alumni have graduated from these places. In fact, after I finished our last service, one of our deacons in his 70s came up to me and he said, I was one of those boys. I lived there for 9 years when I was a kid. They loved me. They took care of me. I said, I had no idea. He says, it's a great story. What a thing to think of. Somebody right here in our own room had this same story. Milton didn't just say, how much do I get to keep because I'm a wealthy businessman? He said, how much can I give away and who can I take care of? Isn't that the answer for all of us? That's his story. This statue that I have on here is actually in their place, and it shows him with his hand on a young man, looking him in the eye, showing him respect and love and acceptance. And he's got his books in his hand. He's got a future. He's got education. He's got something to look forward to, that even though he didn't have parents, he now has someone who cares for him and sees him and loves him. What a great story to look at. This empire is still massive, obviously. There's still chocolate being made out there. But we get to watch all of this. A lot of billionaires will leave their money to their children who will live lives of comfort. But he didn't do that. He gave it away to take care of other people. As you leave today, in the back table back here, there's a little basket with some Hershey's Kisses, just in case you need a little reminder. His story is sweet. The candy is sweet, but how wonderful to be inspired by that. There are people who have great amounts of money that they waste and spend on themselves, and God will deal with those people. James tells us that really clearly today. But we can also say, I don't have to be Mark Zuckerberg. I don't have to be a gazillionaire. I can choose to live simply and give generously too. I can choose to say, God, open my eyes. Show me needs. Show me people that need help from me. Give. Don't stock it up. Give. There's wisdom in being wise about your future, yes, but don't be greedy. There's a difference. Wisdom and greed aren't the same thing. I found a quote that I thought summed up this whole thing so perfectly, and it goes like this. People were created to be loved, and things were created to be used. And the reason our world is in chaos, why? It's because things are being loved and people are being used. It's exactly what James said. People are made to be loved and things are meant to be used. Let's not forget that. As you finish, I'm going to ask you to pray quietly yourself today. And this is your simple prayer. Jesus, I will. Whatever he has put on your heart, whatever he might have convicted you about or talked to you about today, I just want you to respond to that in prayer. You can just bow your head, take about 60 seconds, and just talk back to him. Jesus, I will. And you fill in that blank.